Hey, what's up, y'all? What's poppin'? It's D. About to react to this video by Swakage. This is Dissecting Madara Uchiha. Uchiha. Am I saying that right? I think so. But yeah, I like Madara a lot. I reacted to a couple videos with Madara in it recently, and I really like him. He's just super dope. He's beasting on everybody. So, you know, we're about to see him dissect Madara and go into detail. I know they have a fake Madara and a real Madara, or something like that. So I'm picking up on little details as I go. I'm learning more and more about, Naruto as I'm reacting to, more of these videos. But we're about to see, the real Madara dissected. So let's watch.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Swakage here, and welcome to today's video, where, as you can tell, we're going to be doing an in-depth character analysis of Madara Uchiha. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you may already know then I really like Madara. He's my personal favorite Naruto character and one of my favorite villains of all time. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to be ignoring my own personal bias, and I'd like to ask you to do the same, since I'm going to be looking at the character as objectively as I possibly can. I'm aware that there are plenty of people out there that don't like Madara, and this video is not an attempt to convince them to change their minds. Like I've said, I'm just trying to paint as accurate of a picture of Madara's character as I possibly can. And to do that, I'm going to be taking a look at him on a personal level, like I have in my previous character dissections, but I also want to observe Madara as a piece of the overall Naruto world and lore, as well as from a narrative perspective. So while I may say some things that make me sound like I'm praising the character to high heaven, keep in mind that I'm just stating facts, and most, if not all, of what I say from here on out isn't tied to any of my opinions at all. So if you've got that, great, let's go ahead and get started. I think the best place to begin with Madara's character is his role in the series before he was physically introduced to the audience. Because even before he first showed up on panel and later on screen, he still had a very real presence in the world of Naruto. One that few, if any, characters I'm aware of have managed to replicate without physically appearing in their series beforehand. I really do feel emphasis needs to be placed on how long Madara's build-up lasted, and also on how intense this build-up was. Because, okay, regardless of what you think about him, this was impressive. The amount of patience Kishimoto displayed throughout Madara's build-up is staggering, and I say this because he was first referenced as a part of the history of the Naruto world at the end of chapter 217, when Naruto first arrived in the Valley of the End, and the audience got their first glimpse at the statues of Hashirama Senju, who had already appeared in the series by this point, and Madara Uchiha. His first non-flashback appearance after that was in chapter 559. 342 chapters later. That's a long time. Okay, to put it into perspective, that length of chapters is analogous to the length from the beginning of the series to the end of the Hidan and Kakazu arc. Chapter 342 of the manga took place right after Shikamaru buried Hidan. To help tighten your grasp on how long this lasted, chapter 217 came out in June of 2004, and chapter 559 came out in October of 2011. 7 years and 4 months later. Regardless of what you think of Madara, it is impossible to avoid acknowledging how thoroughly Kishimoto established him before he finally put him in the manga. Whether you think his buildup is good or bad is up to you, but it still gave him an overwhelming sense of presence, again, even before his first appearance. And, I mean, just who else do you know? What other characters can you name who got hyped up for 7 and a half entire real-life years before their debut? I'm not saying that this is an inherently good or bad thing, but
this ain't like Voldemort at all.
To keep in mind that one of the most prominent aspects of Madara's character is his overwhelming importance as a historic figure and just as a member of Naruto's cast. In the 342 chapters between the first appearance of this statue and the first appearance of Madara himself, Madara was consistently mentioned by a whole bunch of different characters in a variety of different situations, from Kurama to Itachi to Jiraiya to Minato, and Obito even claimed to be Madara for a good chunk of these chapters. And this was a claim that pretty much anybody who knew who Madara was pretty shook, which, along with many of the other references to Madara present throughout these chapters, did a really good job solidifying just how important and powerful powerful he was. Now, because of all of this buildup, Madara was practically set up from day one to be ridiculously powerful. As somebody who everyone knew about and who everyone was afraid of, someone who could allegedly fight on par with the first Hokage and had a statue in the Valley of the End, which he supposedly helped create just through the collateral damage of his battle with Hashirama. It seems he was set up from the very beginning to be the final boss, but while all this buildup did make it easier to swallow his crazy powers and all of the stuff he was capable of doing, it came at the cost of making everybody at least temporarily forget that Madara was a human being and more than just a really powerful shinobi. Kishimoto's habit of exploring the pasts of his characters through flashbacks did fix this, however, as it gave the audience a pretty clear look into the past of not only Madara, but Hashirama, Tobirama, and a whole lot of other people born during the Warring States period as well. Not only did this flesh out Madara's motives and make him feel more like a human being, but it also made him into a cornerstone for the vast expansion of Naruto's lore, as thanks to this look into his past, the audience also received a look into a completely different time period in Naruto's history, the Warring States period. Furthermore, Madara's immense amount of influence and the vast amount of ways that he affected the world around him inevitably linked him to the lives of many of Naruto's other key characters, particularly Obito. And all of these connections that Madara had not only made him feel important, but also made the Naruto world in general feel much larger. But I'll get back to that a little bit more in a bit. For now, let's talk about him as a person and how he ended up developing into the supervillain we see at the end of the series, who is determined to, as he says, turn the world from hell into heaven. Now, since Madara doesn't speak very heavily about his personal life, at least aside from his confrontations with Hashirama, as a viewer you can assume that he's gotten over his past, or at least is able to detach himself from it, unlike, for instance, Nagato and Obito, without losing what he took away from everything that happened to him. That being that the world is a terrible place, a point of view that drives Madara to do whatever he can to make the world better, which of course eventually leads him to discovering the infinite Tsukuyomi, the basis of the Eye of the Moon plan. But let's back up a bit and start talking about what it was in Madara's past that he was so bitter about to begin with. Now, if you paid close attention to Madara, you don't really need me to explain this, since a child born into the Warring States period, I mean, it's self-explanatory why Madara wouldn't be the happiest person, especially as an Uchiha after coming out of that. The Warring States period was one of the bloodiest, most violent eras in Naruto's history, like to the extent that the average lifespan of a shinobi was barely above 30. As a member of one of the two clans that participated the most heavily in all of this fighting, I imagine that Madara probably saw the worst of this. After all, the constant conflict took all of his family away from him until he was left with just his younger brother Izuna, who was later killed in a battle with Tobirama. As a child, he started out incredibly idealistic though, at least according to Hashirama, as he explains that both of them spent their free time, during their short childhood friendship at least, imagining what life in a peaceful world would be like, and talking about how they might be able to turn that dream into a reality one day. So as it turns out, he had a really good heart, and despite the constant praise from pretty much everyone around him who considered him a one-of-a-kind genius, Madara didn't become arrogant, at least not initially. As a matter of fact, he was a staunch perfectionist and frequently saw himself as not good enough. To some extent, I imagine that this is a trait he retained later in his life, at least in the sense that Madara rarely compared himself to other people and instead judged himself based on the standards he set for himself, not based on the standards that other people set for him. As a matter of fact, I'd venture to guess that this is due to the fact that he is a bit of an introvert, and always has been, or at least introverted when compared to most of Naruto's other characters. While sometimes that did lead him to compare himself to other people, like when he competed to be stronger than his brother Izuna, or when he constantly fought to become stronger than Hashirama, I think it's safe to say that Madara did this for the sake of self-fulfillment and feeling like he could protect his family, not for the sake of saying he was better than everybody else. Anyway, a lot of what caused Madara to become the jaded supervillain we see him as at the end of the series is due to some pretty deep-rooted and complex history between the Uchiha clan and the Senju, but let's just say that the rivalry between the Uchiha and Senju was very detrimental to Madara's life. It initially dissolved his friendship with Hashirama after the two found out the clan that they each hailed from, and it also led to him feeling like both he and his clan were being persecuted after the foundation of the Hidden Leaf Village. Oh yeah, and also let's not forget that it was this clan rivalry that led to to his entire family being wiped out as well. I mean, yeah, I think you get the idea. Now, to say that this was the only thing that contributed to Madara's transition wouldn't be entirely accurate, but it was one of the things that drove him away from the Hidden Leaf Village and led him to become its first rogue ninja. Of course, there was a whole lot more that led to Madara's change in personality than just all of this, but for the sake of simplicity, let me just say that Madara was a product of the circumstances that he was born into. He really did have a good heart and was only driven to get stronger for the sake of protecting those close to him and preventing his life from getting any more bleak than it already was. And yet, despite the fact that he was one of the most powerful shinobi of his age, with more influence than practically anybody he knew save Hashirama and maybe Tobirama, Madara found himself completely helpless to do anything to keep both his life and the lives of his kin from getting any worse. He constantly saw the worst humanity had to offer, and he consistently found himself unable to do anything about it. This took Madara from the idealistic child that he once was, who initially hoped that he and Hashirama could find a nice, peaceful solution to the problem of war that they had been facing for all of their lives, to a detached, bitter, jaded, cynic, and pessimist who was convinced that any solution that was less than entirely absolute wouldn't be enough to pull the world out of the sorry state it was in, and from his point of view, would be in forever. This is what led Madara to create and pursue the Eye of the Moon plan, and his background is also what led him to use such extreme means to make sure the plan came to fruition. He was used to having to kill other people in pursuit of a goal, for example, so I can understand why he has no issues with killing people in the pursuit of the completion of the Eye of the Moon plan. I think Madara's helplessness, which was still present despite the fact that he was incredibly capable and also incredibly driven to make the world a better place, eventually led Madara to believe that the only way to eliminate conflict from the world was to use something as extreme as a jutsu that would also eliminate free will. I mean, he really did constantly get the short end of the stick and almost never got what he wanted. So put in a position where you constantly get beat down and frequently see those around you suffering the consequences, I can imagine jumping to such a foregone conclusion and feeling like there is absolutely no way to achieve a goal as huge as the elimination of all conflict without using extreme methods. I think he saw the infinite Tsukuyomi as a last resort, but also as his only option. And he truly believed that fulfilling the Eye of the Moon plan was the right thing to do, but his twisted and broken point of view is what led him to pursue it so tirelessly and at the expense of pretty much everybody who opposed him. And also at the expense of Obito. Madara is a very complicated character to describe because, like a few of Naruto's other villains, he is what you could colloquially refer to as an anti-villain. A villain who is using not so nice means to achieve something they believe is for the greater good. Put more simply, a morally gray villain. But at the same time, he's jaded to such a ridiculous extent that it's almost impossible to see him as a good guy just because of how bent and twisted his sense of right and wrong is. But I think that's where part of the charm of his character comes from, because he's more than aware of the fact that people are going to disagree with him due to constantly dealing with the squabbles between the Uchiha and the Senju, and just by the very nature of the Eye of the Moon plan. And after even his own clan turned against him when all he was trying to do was protect them, I think Madara was able to fully detach himself from reality, and thanks in part to his introverted nature, completely ignore the thoughts of others in pursuit of the completion of the Eye of the Moon plan. I think it was the fact that he had the mindset and the outlook of a villain, the intelligence to justify his cynicism, but the same inherent naive stubbornness and unwillingness to give up present in somebody like Naruto that made Madara one of the most dangerous characters in the series and one of its most effective villains. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this character dissection.
Okay, I didn't know that about Madara at all. I didn't know anything about his backstory, but he seems to have that in common with Pain, the anti-villain as he described. I never heard that term before, but yeah, just basically a villain who thinks they're doing the right thing. They think that they're doing, you know, something for the greater good, but their method is just so extreme, and it's like, no, you can't do that. You can't take away all free will. What are you talking about? You know, but he does have good intentions deep down. So that's really cool. Those are my favorite type of villains always, when they're actually trying to do something good, but it's just so fucked up so where you're just like, no, you must be stopped. I get where you're coming from, but you must be stopped because you're going about it the wrong way. Like, your viewpoint is twisted as fuck. Like, relax. You know, so yeah, Madara just seems super beastie. I like him a lot. So I really like this breakdown of his character. So I'll be looking forward to seeing more videos with Madara, more backstories and all of that. All this shit is coming together. It's coming together full circle for me. But let me know what y'all thought about the video, though. Let me know what other videos you want me to react to, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!